There is an English idiom you've likely heard before, blowing smoke up one's arse. Today, we use it to describe empty flattery, fake compliments designed to inflate someone's ego. It sounds crude, ridiculous, and purely metaphorical. But what if I told you this phrase didn't start as a joke? What if I told you that in the 18th century, this wasn't a metaphor, but a serious medical procedure? Imagine you were walking along the freezing banks of the River Thames in London, 1774. You slip. The murky black water swallows you whole. Your lungs fill with fluid and your heart stops beating. You are pulled onto the shore, cold, blue, and lifeless. By today's standards, you need CPR. But this is the 18th century. The doctor rushing to your side isn't holding a defibrillator. Instead, he's gripping a kit made of leather and wood, filled with dried tobacco leaves. And the thing he's about to do to save you is pump liters of thick, concentrated tobacco smoke directly into your rectum. They called it the tobacco smoke enema, a method hailed as a medical miracle sponsored by the Royal Humane Society. But behind the guise of life-saving, it was a physiological nightmare that we are only now fully understanding. Welcome to the dark corners of medical history. Today, we dissect the truth about the time doctors tried to resurrect the dead by blowing smoke inside them. To understand why such an insane idea was accepted, we have to travel back to mid-18th century London. This was the age of enlightenment. Yet the shadow of ignorance still loomed large over medicine. The River Thames at the time wasn't just a transport artery, it was a massive graveyard. Waterway accidents were a daily occurrence. Drowning victims were pulled ashore constantly, and in the eyes of doctors back then, these people were in a state known as apparent death. Their hearts had stopped, but the body remained intact. In 1774, two respected physicians, Dr. William Hawes and Dr. Thomas Cogan, founded an organization called the Institution for Affording Immediate Relief to Persons Apparently Dead from Drowning, the precursor to the Royal Humane Society. Their goal was noble: save the drowning victims. They even offered a reward of 4 guineas, a significant sum at the time, to anyone who successfully used their rescue kit. But what was the logic behind that kit? Why tobacco? At the time, Western medicine was still heavily influenced by the theory of the 4 humours. According to this theory, life was a balance between hot, cold, wet, and dry. A drowning victim was seen as suffering from an excess of cold and wet. Their bodies were freezing and filled with water. To reverse this process, doctors needed something hot and dry to stimulate life back into existence. They found their answer in observations of North American indigenous peoples who were believed to use tobacco smoke in healing rituals. Dr. Richard Mead, a legendary name in medicine since 1745, strongly advocated for the use of tobacco. According to him and his colleagues, tobacco smoke possessed powerful stimulant properties. Their logic was as follows. 1. The heat of the smoke would warm the body from the inside via the rectum, placing it close to the internal organs. 2. The dry nature of the smoke would help dry out the moisture caused by drowning. 3. Most importantly, the stimulation from the nicotine, though they didn't call it nicotine yet, would jolt the autonomic nervous system, forcing the heart to beat again. It sounds reasonable in the context of 1774, doesn't it? But the biological reality was far more brutal than they ever imagined. Now let's visualize the procedure in detail. This is where things get truly horrific in a very clinical way. The Royal Humane Society standardized this rescue kit. It was stationed at rescue points all along the Thames. The kit contained a pair of bellows, like a small fireplace blower, a metal combustion chamber to hold the tobacco, and a flexible hose made of leather or animal intestine, ending in a nozzle. The process went like this. The victim, freshly dragged from the freezing water, clothes soaking wet, would be placed face down or on their side on a wooden plank or directly on the cold ground. No warm blankets, no sedatives. The operator could be a doctor or sometimes just a layman at the station looking to earn that 4 guinea reward, would lubricate the nozzle. Then they would insert it into the victim's anus. The tobacco in the chamber is lit. The pungent smell of burning tobacco begins to fill the air, overpowering the stench of the Thames mud. This is the most terrifying step. The operator begins to work the bellows vigorously. Puff, puff. Volleys of thick, hot, chemical-laden smoke are forcibly driven into the victim's rectum and colon. The goal was to inflate the intestines, spreading the heat and the stimulant as fast as possible. But let's pause on a small yet disgusting detail recorded in history. In the early days, before the bellows kit was standard, or if the bellows broke, medical guidelines suggested a manual alternative. The rescuer would use a pipe, place one end in their own mouth, and blow smoke using their own breath through a tube into the victim. Do you realize the risk here? If the rescuer stopped blowing and accidentally inhaled, they wouldn't just inhale smoke, they would inhale bacteria and fecal matter from the victim's gut, traveling back up the tube. It was precisely for this horrific hygiene reason that the handheld bellows became the mandatory clinical standard to protect the doctor. As for the victim, no one cared about their experience. So what did the victim feel? If the victim was in a deep coma from oxygen deprivation, the pain index was 0 to 10. They were lucky enough to feel nothing. They died in silence. But if the victim was only semi-conscious or their heart was still beating faintly, the pain index skyrocketed to 9-10. It wasn't the warmth the doctors promised. It was violent abdominal distension. The delicate lining of the intestines was scorched by hot smoke and chemicals. The sensation of tenesmus, severe cramping of the colon, would torture their already exhausted body. And worse than the physical pain was what was happening inside their bloodstream. This is where we discuss the lethal irony of this method. 18th century doctors believed tobacco was a stimulant. They thought it would wake up a sleeping heart, but they forgot, or simply didn't know, a critical biological feature of the rectum: its ability to absorb at high speeds. The rectum does not filter toxins like the liver does. When smoke is pumped in here, nicotine bypasses the body's defenses and enters the bloodstream at a dizzying rate in massive, uncontrolled doses. Instead of stimulating the heart, a massive dose of nicotine causes acute poisoning. It acts as a depressant on the cardiovascular system of an already failing body. It causes bradycardia, slowing of the heart, and finally, complete cardiac arrest. Think about the irony. A person just pulled from the brink of death, their heart perhaps still fluttering, a chance of survival if simply kept warm. But the very enthusiastic rescue attempt by the doctors, the pumping of a neurotoxin into their system, dealt the final killing blow. They didn't die from drowning. They died from nicotine poisoning right on the rescue table. Furthermore, the pressure from the bellows was sometimes too immense. There were documented cases where the victim's intestines ruptured from the air pressure, causing internal bleeding and sepsis. If the nicotine didn't kill them, the massive internal trauma would. How long did this nightmare last? Nearly half a century. It wasn't until 1811 that the light of true science began to shine. Scientist Sir Benjamin Brodie published a groundbreaking study in the Journal of the Royal Society. Through animal experiments, Brodie proved a brutal truth. Nicotine is a cardiac poison. He demonstrated that infusing tobacco into the rectum did not save animals. It killed them almost instantly by stopping their hearts. Brodie's research was the death knell for the tobacco smoke enema. Doctors began to realize their fatal mistake. By the mid-19th century, around the 1850s, the practice vanished from medical textbooks. The Royal Humane Society quietly recalled the smoke kits from the riverside stations. They shifted to safer new methods: artificial respiration, ventilation, and mechanical warming measures. Today, those leather and wood smoke kits sit silent in medical history museums, serving as macabre relics of an era where the line between curing and killing was as thin as a wisp of smoke. What is the lesson here? It is humility in the face of science. Those 18th century doctors weren't murderers. They were pioneers, passionate men who wanted to save lives. Hawes and Kogan were true humanitarians, but they acted on a false hypothesis, and that enthusiasm, combined with ignorance, created a tragedy. The next time you hear someone use the phrase blowing smoke up your arse to describe fake flattery, remember this story. Remember that there was a time when that phrase was literal, and be silently thankful that you live in the 21st century, where if you find yourself in danger, doctors will use modern machines and precise knowledge to save you, not a pair of bellows and a handful of dried leaves. Medical history is written not just by brilliant successes, but by haunting mistakes. And the tobacco smoke enema is certainly a dark chapter we never wish to repeat.